treat. So we're not joining this by video with Mary today. She's calling in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen as well. And we'll go ahead and we're recording it anyway, but we'll go ahead and start it now. Mary, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Debbie. And thank you. I understand when I finally got in through the audio call, I understand that we have 3 participants. If you have the ability, please do introduce yourself because I'd love to know who's on the call.
Hi, this is Susan Bernstone. I'm in New York. Hi.
Hi. And we have one other person that's listening.
Joel Weinberger.
Oh, that.
Island. Hi, Susan. Hi.
So we've got Susan and Debbie and Mary and Joel. Well, what a four musketeers we are this afternoon. So I thank you so much for your patience while we're getting the zooming around all together. Of interest is while I was calling in, since I'm still at a percentage of Zoom to get into the meeting itself, I did call in on a number of numbers, right, to get into the meeting. And interestingly enough, all but this one, which I did get in on, obviously, were busy. So it says a lot about this moment in time, obviously, that we are, dialing back bandwidth on Netflix and YouTube and all of that because we're concerned about the level of impact on the internet and telecommunications in this particular case. So I do appreciate, again, your time this afternoon. I would like to tell you a little bit about Moonmark, and although I'm not on the video screen, if you might, if you could possibly, I'm assuming you're on or near your computers, if you could go, please, to moonmark.space. Moonmark.space. And what you'll see there is an overview of the somewhat audacious program that we have started. And the goal here is that we are a television, a digital and next generation media company. We create content, we create experiences that will reach, in this particular case, tens, if not hundreds of millions of people across the globe. So in 2021, we are going to have 2 vehicles that are going to be built between now and then, and they will be attached to a lunar lander that is going to be launched on a SpaceX rocket, appended to the lunar lander that's the Nova C from our space partner, Intuitive Machines. Going to land on the moon. We're going to be settled into the regolith there, and then we're going to race. So all of that, the purpose of that is, and our relevance here in this conversation to the Mentor Project, is that the mission of Moonmark is to engage the demographic that's going to have the stewardship of the next steps of humanity. And as we look at space commercialization and the imminence of it, it's already here, but it's growing ever so greatly by the day. And the people that are those that the Mentor Project solves or serves are those that are going to have the greatest opportunity, the greatest responsibility, and the greatest impact on what's to come in the next decade. So what we've done is we put together a challenge, a contest, whereby students from around the world, what you see there a little bit further down is we had started out, and we're changing this today as a matter of fact, we had started out with 6 locations, high school teams from 6 locations that were going to compete in qualifying rounds to get to 2 teams. And those 2 teams would then compete to build the vehicles and land and race them on the moon. What has occurred over the past, 3 weeks, as we well know, is that the world has changed perhaps forever. Certainly, it impacts what we are doing here. So we have adjusted our, entrepreneurism is called a pivot. We've adjusted our program, and now it's going to be, instead of 6 cities in the United States, it's going to be global. So that's a fire hose of Moonmark. So with, do you have any questions about what I just shared, which was a fire hose? This is, and I'm going to transition here shortly into, entrepreneurism, especially the thing that I care deeply about, which is taking control when one feels like one has none. But what questions do you have about Moonmark? Because we can continue to have that obviously in context as we talk about it here. But if you have any questions right now, I'm happy to hear them. Dag, I must be really good. Okay. So let's talk for a moment, because the topic of this discussion is entrepreneurism. And entrepreneurism has really become, in the past, I would say 10 years or so, as social media and Silicon Valley have risen to their current state, has become a byword. Well, you're really entrepreneur, or you have a different perspective, or that sort of thing. And there are certain aspects of entrepreneurism. It's easy to recognize a true entrepreneur. A lot of people want to be entrepreneurs because they think that it's cool, or they think that it could make them a lot of money, or various things. But the reality is that there are certain aspects of the entrepreneur that make one authentic. And having lived through that myself a number of times, I can recognize it, a mile away. I have a passion for helping entrepreneurs, mentoring entrepreneurs, and especially people that wonder whether they would like to be an entrepreneur and don't know whether they can or want to be. The fact is that I've discovered that one does not have a choice. It's something that you must do, because there is a level of risk associated with it that, I don't know, probably 98% of humans don't have. And that risk tolerance enables the kinds of views, of opportunities, of creation of opportunities, of passion around what is to be done, of serving people as well as product. And interestingly enough for me, what I always say is, what is going to help you when you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you say, what in the world am I doing? Because it's a very, very bleak moment in time at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's not quite dawn, and it's not, you still can't do the comedy late shows, right? So you're sitting there or lying there with yourself and you're saying, what am I doing? And so many people are lying in that bed with a spouse or a partner and a family in the other room. And the decisions that they make every day can affect the livelihood and the futures of all of those people. So it's a very, very challenging road to go down. The aspects of entrepreneurism, yes, there's a higher risk tolerance. There must be an ability within the person to have a high degree, a very, very high tolerance of rejection, and the ability to not take that rejection personally. So, for example, you know, if you are raising funds or you are selling, the best money you're going to get in a company is revenue. And if you are selling, then, you know, the likelihood is for both people that you want to give you money or people that you want to purchase your products or services, the rejection level is very, very high. So I want to talk to you for a moment about Moonmark. And before I do, though, I want to share one iteration of what an entrepreneur is. And that iteration is something called a founder. And founders are a different breed of cat than an entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur can look at a business opportunity with all of those aspects that I just described and apply business principles and all of the great things that you know, you can do in leadership, teamwork, problem solving, and so forth. They may not have the ability to be a founder. A founder is an entrepreneur on steroids. So you take someone who is a founder and they come up with an idea of something that does not exist, and they determine whether there's a market for it. They determine whether there's an ability to bring a team around it, whether there's an ability to capitalize it, execute on it, and grow it. That is another level of what I call curious insanity of entrepreneurism. And my family will tell you, oh yeah, she's got that particular insanity, all right. So with Moonmark and other projects that I have done, and we'll talk about that moment where you get to the point where you know it's no longer the right thing for you, and somebody else needs to come in and take it to its next step. We'll talk about that in a moment. But for Moonmark, as with other projects that I've done, I'm compelled by a notion and an idea that for me requires the following. It requires an impact of broad audiences, like millions of people. If I am going to dedicate my time, my talent, and my heartbeats to an endeavor of creating something from an idea, for me, it's possible, it's absolutely necessary that it has to be scalable. It has to be scalable on a large level. So that's the first thing. It has to have a positive impact and influence on people who I will never meet and never know what impact it will have. Only that it has to be inspirational, it has to be positive. And it has to be something that would inspire them to take a step in their lives that they may not do otherwise. So people, when I tell them about Moonmark, the first thing they ask is, oh, well, you know, are you a space engineer? No. Well, are you an engineer? No. Well, you know, did you work for NASA? No. I got an English degree. That's what I got. But I also know how to create things and ideas and concepts that bring very, very brilliant people around me. And I do have a very strong track record of executing. So you can come up with an idea, and it can be a great idea, and you can even get some people's interest in it. But if you cannot execute, then the total thing is it's an exercise in, you know, entertainment or something, if that's what entertains you. So with Moonmark, I started out with the idea of I wanted to work with young people. As I learned about space commercialization, I wanted very much to be able to impact this next generation, to inspire them in a way that, I know this sounds I know this sounds, I don't want it to sound as though I'm not humble, because I am, but I have the commitment to bring to our young people another Apollo effect. The last Apollo effect happened in 1969 when humans first walked on the moon. So what occurred for that was that during a period of time, there was an increased public awareness that it was going to happen. And so you had kids in the classroom that, you know, were waiting on tenterhooks, and the teachers had the curriculum to, you know, teach and prepare them. And you know, it's all, I was listening yesterday to Hall of Famer astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria, who was saying that he was 11 years old on the beach when, you know, all of a sudden, you know, strangers started hugging each other and saying, "We've walked on the moon, we've walked on." It was a unifying moment. And it was one that inspired him as a young boy to ultimately become an astronaut. That hasn't happened, not because we haven't had heroic people in space between then and now, and missions and so forth, but because there has not been something of such magnitude, importantly, the way to communicate it to people across the earth, since 1969. So with Moonmark, the idea is to work with young people, to give them the ability to land on the moon, to do something that will be compelling to everyone who wants to watch. So I started out, this is back to the entrepreneur thing, I started out with the notion that, okay, we get, you know, high school students together, they get their projects together, we have a competition, and the winner lands on the moon. So you take an idea like this to market, and you know what happens is, what happened to me, and it's completely expected, is that I got complete rejection. Okay, and the comments or the feedback that I got was, well, is this an education program? You know, is this a science camp? Is it a space camp? You know, what is it? And so that went on for about 6 months. And that was, you know, rejection is never pleasant, but what one must do as an entrepreneur, and especially as a founder, is to say, okay, well, what am I hearing? These people don't know me, so it's not personal. They're not looking at me saying, "Mary, you know, you look like you're okay, but you sound like you're smoking your socks, right? You're going to land on the moon and do this stuff." So the constant that I got was that there was confusion in the message. There was confusion in the message that I was sending. And the ultimate outcome of that was that I said, okay, if I'm going to achieve the Apollo effect, it has to be something completely different from anything that's been done before. And the fact that we can have young people do it, and the technology exists to do it now, we need to have the right messaging around it. And so that comes to something called a pivot. The first pivot of Moonmark happened in the summer of 2019. And that pivot was, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build 2 vehicles, and we're going to put them on a lunar lander. We're going to put them on the moon, and we're going to race. We're going to race these 2 vehicles on the moon. And we're going to capture video, we're going to capture content, and we're going to share with the world the adventure of these young people who are making history. Now, both of those models, one, the science camp, NASA camp, whatever, and the other one, a race on the moon, both of this moment in time seem to be outlandish. But interestingly enough, the race on the moon has taken off. It's completely, like, wow, that's something really different. Well, why are you doing that? If you do a pivot in a business, especially one that is, a sharp left or a sharp right, there has to be a commitment to the DNA of what you started out with. Because if you don't, it's the wrong decision. It's the wrong turn to make. So the question about why are you going to race on the moon brings us back to our original DNA, which is to say, okay, we want young people to be understanding that they have a future in space exploration, they have a future in STEAM disciplines, and it's accessible to them. Not only that, but it's exciting, and it can change the world and the universe. In order to get to race on the moon, you don't get there without science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. You just can't do it. So that is the integrity of the DNA that we started with. But what we've done in that pivot is to say, okay, this is a competition that's going to happen on the moon. That certainly never happened before. It's a commercial landing, the first commercial landing that's ever happened. And it's also the culmination of months of work and teamwork and problem solving and leadership of these young people that people can follow. So it doesn't matter whether you are working in a shoe store that ultimately will open again in Omaha, or you're I don't know, a tech developer in Atlanta or something. The thing that people love is they love authenticity, they love stories, they love competition if it's sports person like and it has integrity, and they want the team that they root for to win. Okay, so you put all of that combination of things together, and what you have is a way to remain true to the DNA of what you started out to do, understand the feedback from the market that wasn't working, and figure out, okay, what is it that we can put together and take it to market again and see if that works. And lo and behold, if you do those things, it can work. Now, in the early part of that, it's very, very hard to feel as though you have control over anything. It's like people on a whim can say, you know what, I got a little heartburn today, I don't like your idea. Okay, you have no control over so much. But if you approach things with a way of thinking about feedback as data and not rejection as personal, then you actually have the ability to take control over things that you feel like you didn't have control over. I'm going to pause there now and ask if you have any questions. Seriously? Nobody, I've been talking for half an hour. Is somebody still really there, or have I gone off the line?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time unmuting people, so.
You want me to
Okay.
Yeah. So we do have a question. Oh, good.
Can you hear me? Am I getting too much feedback? Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay, hold on.
So mute me. Okay.
You know what? I wonder if I can't see the chat in the Zoom. Would you like to maybe, and then Debbie, if you could provide.
We're gonna be able to do it one at a time. It's okay. Go ahead.
I have several questions, but my first question is, how do you persevere? You've described people reacting to you like you had two heads. You've described getting rejection. I understand it's not personal, but somehow you had to bust through all of that, and I'm curious how you do that.
Is this Joel?
Yes.
Okay, Joel, thank you. That is a wonderful question, and it really takes a number of things. The first thing is that one has to, as I mentioned earlier on, there's something about an entrepreneur and about a founder that there is a drive that is it puts a lot of strain on people around them, because it feels as though there is no ration, right? When people are telling you over and over again, you know, there's this wrong or that wrong or this wrong, and people who love you don't want you to go through that, right? So that can be stressful, that in and of itself. So one must have the passion and the belief of whatever it is that you started out to do, because that is what will sustain you through the times when you do say, what in the world am I doing? Is this the right course? What impact am I having on people? And it could be my, you know, my family. It could be my loved ones. It could be people that work with you, right? So yeah, you have to have that passion, and because that will sustain you when you have no money and you're not getting paid, right? Separate from that, or addition to that, experience is really, really invaluable. So a young entrepreneur, for example, will have a difficult time with what is perceived to be rejection and is actually market feedback, right? Because you know, the entrepreneur's ego and personality is very, very caught up in this. It's a you know, it's a symbiotic you know, relationship within the human being. So the more that you experience things, the more you can start to understand that what someone is telling you has a message that, with the right filter, can be very beneficial to you. I'll give you an example of that. So I'm here in Northern Nevada, and our university system here is the University of Nevada, and we have Reno as the wonderful, wonderful university. So I'm sitting there with you know, one of my colleagues, and we're having a conversation with the director of the Innovation Center. Okay, this is the biggest, you know, all the great minds and all the great, you know, thoughts and, you know, really kind of come out there. You know, it's innovation. That's what this is all about. So there were two professors there with the director of innovation, one of whom was, you know, an astrophysicist. And so, you know, we're talking about Moonmark and how, you know, what the plan is, how we're going to live it. And I'm, you know, kind of getting this interesting body language from her. And, you know, kind of got, you know, her lips were getting all pursed and stuff like that. And so I said, tell me, Dr. So-and-so, what are you thinking right now? And she said, I'm thinking that you can never do this. That's not possible. And I took a breath, because that kind of thing can be incendiary in any meeting, right? It's confrontational, it's judgmental, it's stuff like that, right? And for somebody who it can feel like an attack, and certainly the way that it was delivered, right? So I took a breath and I said, well, Dr. So-and-so, why don't you kindly describe to me why I can't do what I'm going to do? And she said, and that took her, and I wasn't, you know, I just made it, you know, as a clear statement as I possibly could, or question as I possibly could. And so she was taken aback, and she said, well, and then she goes into all of the reasons why it's going to cost you $100 million. It's going to take you 10 years. NASA couldn't do it, blah, blah, blah. All of the things that I've heard from multiple sources. But coming from her, it was, and coming from that academic setting, right? it was very, very valuable information for me because, however, you know, annoying it was at the time, right? It was annoying. I took away from that. I wonder how many others within academia may have the same kinds of reaction, simply because they've spent their professional lives in the science that's taken, you know, the depth and taken the time and the money and the resources and all of that. And, you know, here I come along and I'm saying, I want to put some kids on the moon, right? The valuable feedback to me was I may not have a really warm reception within higher academics. Okay, so what that tells me as an entrepreneur is if I have a priority between a technical company that is innovative in ways that can move us forward, or I'm trying to get some support from a university, right? That helps me prioritize my time, effort, and resources. Okay, and in that way, there's no judgment, there's no harm, there's no foul. Okay, it's simple market data that one can make decisions from, and it served me pretty well. So that's an example of, you know, you can come away from something like that, and it can be it can be from a human being, it could be a setback, or you can say, what do I need to hear from this? And how can this be a gift to me? You know, I spent 15 minutes and, you know, a cup of coffee to get this valuable piece of market data. So that helps with the perseverance question, Joel.
Well, that's a great answer. And if I could sum it up to make sure I understand it, it's you didn't take it personally, which I think most people would have. Maybe that's what makes you an entrepreneur. You took it as information that you could use. And the information was, I really am not going to work a lot with academics who have this kind of a bias. And I'm glad I learned that.
That is a great summation of that particular example. And again, the academics are people that are near and dear to my heart. Many in my family are academics, and I'm grateful for that profession. Sometimes it doesn't, you know, it isn't, in this particular case, it's not necessarily a great amalgam to move forward in a quick and efficient manner. But if you look at other kinds of, if you use that as an example of you know, I've sat in front of funders. I've sat in front of you know, ultra high net worth individuals who have their finances managed by a family office, and it's the family office manager's job to just completely rip you apart. And again, it's nothing personal. It's just, what is the business? You know, how are you going to make us money? We align with what you're doing. We like what you're doing. What is the business model? And how? And I'm going to poke every hole in it possible to prevent, you know, my billionaire from giving you, you know, $100,000. Right. So you can go into that experience. Number one, you need to be prepared. You need to understand what kind of information that they're looking for, and you need to make sure that you can, you know, answer all of those questions too sweet. And if you can't answer the questions, the ones that you do answer had better be solid. And then you can ask for a little forbearance while you go and get the answers to the ones that you don't have. So it's certainly not just academics, but it's in virtual every walk of what we're doing. Are there other questions?
I could ask a million, but I'm going to let other people take off. This is fascinating to me. Thank you, Mary.
Let me just ask more if Susan has questions, because she unmuted before. So hold on a second.
I don't. Thanks, Debbie. I'm just like, I'm like wowed by a lot of what you're saying in terms of, you know, I'm thinking about people in my life who clearly are entrepreneurs, and I'm thinking, oh, I am so not an entrepreneur. I'm the ideas person who has not been able to, you know, that's not my thing. But I wanted to also comment, Joel, what you were saying in the question, and I have a psychology background, so I'm in the field of mental health. And what it reminds me of in terms of like, how do you deal with that rejection? It's almost like when we ask, like, what's good about this in a really bad situation? What can you learn from this? So removing oneself, because in anything that's even, you know, negative, we can always look at something like, okay, what can we get out of this, even if it's bad? And I was just thinking about that as Joel, you were doing your summation.
That is a wonderful description, Susan. Thank you very much for that. And as you for both you and Debbie, your choice of profession is just so deeply you know, appreciated by so many people of us out there who you know, who really need the kind of expertise that you deliver. Thank you. Susan, as you look at the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess one question would be, being that I am an ideas person, and I sometimes, you know, and I'm sure most of us do this, you have this idea and you just have it in your head, and then like 5 years later, you see it on a national level and it's working. And that's happened to me on several different things. And I'm just wondering, what can you speak to? So if you think you have a really good idea, but you're not the person that really can execute it, are there steps that one should take to talk to other people who are in that industry to, you know, because that seems very large for me. And I know, like, I'll mention it to, you know, friends and family. And then sure enough, many years later, I see it and it's like, wow, it was a good idea, only I didn't know what to do with it.
Yes, I certainly relate to that, there are a couple of things that happen from what you're describing, and there actually is a pathway. So the thing that happens is one has an idea, and one, you know, is convinced that it's a really good idea. Oftentimes what happens is, you know, people who have ideas have a life, right? And that life tends to be something that takes up the majority of the day and the night. It's the profession, it's the family, it's the, the house renovation, whatever it is. Okay, and so what happens is, as time goes along, the idea doesn't go away. But when one discovers later that you see it in some fruition, right? There's a couple of things that happen. One is, why couldn't I, or why didn't I do that? I didn't know how. And the second one is, you know, it feels like someone stole your idea. That's not the case, right? Unless somebody just flat out, you told them something and they go off and steal your idea, right? But generally that doesn't happen. Generally it's a situation where, let's just say that the idea is that, sorry, we're a dog-friendly workplace here. The idea is that, you know, shoelaces are hard for kids, so we're going to put Velcro on, right? Now, this has happened a long time ago, but we're just using that here. So it's a good idea, and somebody else came up with it and got it to market. And so there you are walking around at the park with your kids, and you see other kids that got shoes with Velcro. There's a personal thing that happens with people who have ideas, and then they see the fruition elsewhere. So the thing to remember about entrepreneurism, and especially as someone who is a founder, someone who has an idea and needs to pull something or needs to bring it to fruition, is that nobody has one idea that that solves whatever the issue is for the whole world. There's so much opportunity. Instead of, Velcro, it could be some kind of other fastener, right? So it's not like there's only one idea. It's like there's so much opportunity to take things to market that it doesn't have to be, well, somebody got my Velcro idea, so I'm done, right? It doesn't have to be that way. And there's not, except in Hollywood, that's the one caveat. If you have an idea in Hollywood, it will be stolen if you don't protect it. But other than that, there's lots of room for entrepreneurial growth. Now that said, what does one do if you have an idea, but you're not an executor, right? The best thing to do is to have co-founders. Now, the co-founders is a completely different breed of cat, business model and all of that. It's one of the biggest reasons why startup businesses fail is because of co-founders. And it's happened to me. But if you want to bring an idea to market, it's important to bring people around you that have expertise that you don't. It's also very, very important that you value what you have, what you bring, because without what you bring, the executors can't do it, right? Because they don't have the idea. They are operational people. So in looking at bringing an idea to market, I think it's really important to understand that you don't have to do everything. In fact, it's essential that you don't do everything. It's essential that you find the skill sets and the people that you need around you, and then find out the best business mechanics to make that happen. Does that make sense, Susan?
Yeah. I have another question if Susan is not done, if Susan's done. Otherwise, please continue.
Go, Joe.
Mary, you started this by talking about risk. So there's always risk reward. And you just said that you've had the experience of things not working out. How do you deal in advance with the idea that it might not happen? It might, I don't know if the word fail is in your vocabulary, but you have an idea. It's a great idea. It doesn't work. By the way, related to that, there are ideas and there are ideas. There's Velcro and there's going on the moon. So I'm already mentioning it.
Well, I will give you an example because it's very important when you think about the risks associated and the risk of what we're talking about. Forget about the moon for a minute, but the risk associated with starting a business and getting it to market and making it successful. The attributes around that are predictable. They're risky, but they're predictable. So I started out earlier, and I said that I was going to come back to it, and it's very, very important. So if you are an entrepreneur, and especially if you're a founder, you have a particular set of skills, right? Risk tolerance is one of them. Creating opportunity is another. Having the ability to convince people to give you money for whatever it is that you're doing is another one, right? There comes a time in the normal cycle of things where your skill set is not the best skill set for the business. It doesn't mean that you're failing and you're running off the rails or anything like that. It means that, and that's what happens in the venture capital community, right? You get here comes the entrepreneur, here comes the startup guys, and they're scrappy and they do all the pick and axe work and they get it all done, and then they're making money and the VCs say, great, well now you guys go do something else. We're going to bring in the professional management team. Right? And that is a very, very difficult thing for entrepreneurs to accept because they think, well, this was my baby, you know, here come these suits and now they're going to take over the company. So the way that I work with people, and it can feel like a complete failure, when in actuality, it's very much a success, right? They have done everything that they started out to do and done it so well that they've got people to come in and take the business to the next level because those people have a different skill set. And the thing that I learned, and it took me a while to learn it, was that the place where I love to be and where I thrive and where my sweet spot is in the ideation and the really, really, I call it pick and axe work, where, you know, you are just chipping at that stone and you have an idea of what that sculpture is going to look like, but not really. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. So I had a situation where I had a co-founder, and we started a business. We were philosophically aligned. We were absolutely philosophically aligned on what the mission was, what the business model was, how we were going to go to market, and all of that stuff. And he had one role in the business. So I was the operator, and I had my team, but he had one role in the business. He had a completely different profession, and his role was to bring in business opportunities. So he would bring them in. We were closing $1 million deals, multi-million-dollar deals. And then something really interesting happened. His professional aspirations changed. So what we created together happened to be something of very strong value to him in his new profession. And so he could point at what we did and say, I did that. And, you know, he's pretty much like that, right? He wasn't too much of a we person. And so he used what we had created to get money for his other endeavor. And that was extremely painful because I and my team had worked very, very hard to make, you know, some great successful things happen for the company. And to do it with, you know, in philosophical alignment. And, you know, I had to come to grips with that reality because at first I couldn't really quite believe that it was happening. But then it was very clear what was happening. And I had to I chose to shut down the company. And so that was very painful. And one could say, you know, could describe that as a failure, I guess. It surely didn't feel good at the time, and it cost a lot of time and effort and money and heartache. But on the other side of it, you know, I'm pretty doggone sure of what I don't want in a co-founder and what business mechanics I need to put into place to make sure that such a thing doesn't happen again. So those things happen in business, and they happen in life too. But, you know, failure to me is a way of learning. I had this conversation with an astronaut, and you know, we were going at it. We were having a spirited conversation. He said, "Mary, failure is not an option," and I said, "You know, failure is essential." Okay, because if you do not fail, you do not understand what is not working, and you're not going to tell me that you go up in space and you can't fail. Okay, you failed about 1 million times before you got on that rocket and went up. And if you had not failed all those times, or all the people around you hadn't failed all those times, you wouldn't be sitting here, you know, having a nice cocktail, right? So it really is, you know, a way of thinking, and you know, entrepreneurs are known for being overly optimistic, and that is a part of what we do and how we go together in life. I am, I think, about 5 minutes away from being done. Thank you so much. If there are any other questions, I'll try to be quick.
So my other question was, there's Velcro and there's landing on the moon. Are you the kind of person that goes for the big impact ideas, the more practical ideas, the combination of the two? How do you pick your ideas?
I'm not a Velcro person. So one of the things that, and by that, what the filter through which I'm saying that is people are motivated by different things, okay? And I am motivated any time that I have been presented with an idea or that is going to make a lot of money. I typically run the other direction because that motivation does not align with me. Velcro makes a lot of money, right? Whoever came up with that idea, you know, they're probably sitting on a yacht, you know, completely quarantined in the, you know, Mediterranean Sea. But that's not something that motivates me. I need to use my finite heartbeats dedicated to something that, like landing on the moon. It's not landing on the moon. It is creating an experience for all of these young people who are, especially right now, are at a terrifying time in their lives. They'll never forget it. And oh, by the way, they can land on the moon, okay? They can land on the moon. And if some other kid someplace else can do it, I can do it too. That's what motivates me. And so when I think about something that has broad appeal and impact, I know the money will come. The money will come, but I'm not motivated by the money. And so each person, whether you're investing in an entrepreneur or you're thinking about becoming one, it's really remaining true to oneself and the motivation. Because at 4 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter if you got $1 billion. You know, if you're laying there with your eyes open and you're not happy, it doesn't matter.
This was great, Mary. Do you have a question, Susan? I'll take that as a no. I don't see her unmuting.
Yeah, no, I was trying and I got caught up in something. I just want to say that was unbelievable. I have so much to say to what you just said, but I'm not going to. And you said things so eloquently right now, and it's beautiful. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Joel.
I echo what they both said. This was really helpful and useful. And I think that, you know, anyone who goes out to or wants to start a company, wants to start a business, or has an entrepreneurial streak within them, this was super useful and helpful because you really tied everything together in with a very nice bow so that it was really understandable. So I thank you very much, Mary.
Well, it is my pleasure. I can't thank you enough for your time and attention this afternoon. I am so honored to be invited to be a part of the Mentor Project, and I look forward to you know, contributing in whatever way I can to his continued success. So, wishing you all a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're signing off now. Everyone, stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. Thanks, Debbie, for setting this up.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.